What's up, guys? How's it going? Alright, so this is going to be the recommended build for the Snapdragon. Now, we already have one build video that goes over in depth about how to assemble the frame, you know, putting everything together, soldering everything, and that's for a one stack build. What I mean by that is there's only one board stack in here, and we used like a super all-in-one, so it had the ESCs, flight controller, everything all in one. But that's a very tight build, and I actually recommend doing the two stack build, which is the build that is in all three of these quads. All three of these are exactly the same, except the two on the outside have a crossfire antenna, and the one on the inside has a FreeSky XSR antenna. But as far as how everything's soldered, how everything's oriented, connected, zip tied, everything is exactly the same. I'm running 3210 kilohertz speed. It is crazy smooth. I've got the OSD dynamic filter, Betaflight 3.2 on it. It's amazing, and this is just the build that I recommend doing. For more information on how to do the exact stack build that's discussed in this video, check the description below. There's a PDF document with everything labeled and laid out, talking about every single component of the stack, so you can reproduce it exactly. It does play a big part in using sensitive gyros, because you are going to be using the mounting screws for the structural supports as well. So the mounting screws for the flight controller and whatnot. Alright, another thing that you want to keep in mind is that you do not want to use boards with conductive mounting holes. The most common example of a conductive mounting hole is basically boards with metal around the mounting holes right here. Because the standoffs are going to have a steel screw through them, you don't want any current transferring through the ESC 4-in-1 ESC or flight controllers. So example of a board without conductive mounting holes is this one right here, where you can see that the PCB just extends directly to the hole. So conductive on the right, which is bad, non-conductive on the left, which is good. Okay, so let's just go ahead and go over the stack setup from bottom to top in this build, and then we'll pull it apart and show you guys the orientation of how I've done the parts. From the bottom, I have the M3 by 30 millimeter screw. Then I have the bottom plate. I have an arm. Then I have the mid plate. Then right above that, I have a nylon nut. Then above that, I'm choosing to use the 4-in-1 Luminaire 35 amp ESC with the 12 and 5 volt BEC. On top of that, I'm using a M3 8mm standoff. On top of that, I'm using the Fortini F4 OSD. This already has this great soft mounting option here, and you don't want to crush these. You want the board to be able to move around freely, so the most important aspect to this build is probably the nylon nut on top of the FC. When we finally put that on, if we were building this, you want to screw the nylon down so it's snug against the flight controller, but you do not want it to be crushing the gummy right there. So on top of the nylon nut, we've got the other M3 by 8mm standoff, then we have the top of the frame, and then finally we have one M3/6 screw. Okay, so this is a look inside the Snapdragon. We've got the camera right here, which very easily just comes right off. You can swivel it off right like that. We can just let it hang right there. And then you can kind of see how we have that M3 by 8 standoff, and we have that nylon nut right there, and the gummy of the flight controller. Then in the back we've got the VTX right there, and on top of this is just a Unify Pro V2. We've got it going smart audio into the Fortini OSD. I've got the USB on the right so that I can have the camera easily connect there on top. And I have the VTX connecting in the back right there on the Fortini. Now the reason why I also have the USB going out to the right is because on the bottom of this board, on the left side, it has a few capacitors and things which make it, it doesn't really give you the clearance that you need to have these cables come apart here. Alright, so continuing going into it, and you can see how each one of them have the nylon nut and then the spacer. So I'm just going to take off the spacers. Oops. Alright, and I should have also mentioned that underneath the Fortini I have a crossfire right there. So we'll take off the nylon nuts now. Again, these are snug against the flight controller, but they're not crushing it. Now the nice thing about these nylon nuts is that when you make them snug against the flight controller, like right there, like that, you don't want to over tighten them. You just want to have them be barely snug right there. And then when you put the standoff on and you twist the standoff down, it's going to get really difficult to twist it once it hits that nylon nut, and it kind of holds it in place. It's not moving the nylon nut and it's not crushing the flight controller, but you've got a very snug connection for this standoff, and that's probably the biggest, most important aspect of this build. You need to not crush the flight controller by doing this little trick here where the flight controller has that room to kind of move up and down. So that sensitive inverness gyro, or basically anything that can run more than 8.8 kilohertz, has room to breathe. All right, so opening up the flight controller. Whenever I do my builds, if I solder anything to the bottom as well as the top, I like to make it super easy to just fold over the flight controller while I'm working on it. So I'm just going to pull this guy up, and I'm just going to fold it over like that. Now you can see this is, again, a very tight build, but in working on it like this, how I've folded everything right there like that, I have my wires going. It's, everything's snug, everything's long enough to work with. Like when you want to take it apart, you can resolder everything, you can get to everything fairly easily, but it's not like an excess of wires when it's all put back together. If you do go with this Luminaire 4-in-1 35 amp ESC, when you get it, the wires are sticking out of the board this way off, and I didn't want the wires to have that bulge there sticking out, so I desoldered them and I kind of soldered them diagonal right here so that they go over to the side like that, and they come out basically right there on the side of the quad. Oops, there it is, on the side of the quad. And in doing that, that also gives room for these capacitors I was talking about on the Fortini when I clamp down. And you can see the crossfire is just right there. It sticks out a little bit, but if you're really picky on it sticking out, you can get a FrSky R XSR or something smaller and stick it right in there. Cool. So that is kind of the suggested build for the Snapdragon. It's a tight build, but let me tell you, like, once you get this guy solid, you're gonna love it. It is such a breeze to fix on the field, and it's such a smooth flight, and it's so light with incredibly powerful motors. So definitely check out the site, check out the description below for where to buy it, and try this guy out.